Senator from South Carolina.
I'd ask unanimous consent to terminate the quorum call.
The Senate is not on a quorum call.
Sorry.
Senator.
Okay, thank you.
The senator is recognized.
I'd like to, please inform me when 10 minutes has expired. Thank you. Mr. President, I rise tonight to let the military know that we may have a short night in the Senate, but you're going to have better days ahead. This whole exercise for me is about you. It's about those who have been fighting this war for the last 17 years. It's about stopping the madness created by the Congress in 2011. What we did in 2011 is come up with a budget proposal called sequestration, that if we could not find a bipartisan path forward to cut $1.2 trillion from the federal budget over a decade, we would punish the military by taking $600 billion out of the military and $600 billion out of non-defense spending and leave entitlements alone where the money's at. Nobody thought it would happen. It was a penalty clause in the Budget Control Act to make sure that the super committee would act responsibly. Well, guess what? They didn't. No use blaming them over everybody else. The bottom line is we couldn't reach a budget agreement. We spent $47 trillion over the next 10 years is how much we'll spend. We couldn't save $1.2 trillion, so sequestration kicks in. So what has it done to our military? This is what General Mattis says, the Secretary of Defense. Let me be clear, as hard as the last 16 years of war have been on our military, no enemy in the field has done as much harm to the readiness of the U.S. military than the combined impact of the Budget Control Act's defense spending caps, worsened by operating for 10 of the last 11 years under continuing resolutions of varied and unpredictable duration. This is the Secretary of Defense telling the Congress that no enemy on the battlefield has done more damage to our military than the budget agreement that we reached in 2011. So I want to congratulate President Trump for keeping his campaign promise to rebuild the military. In case you couldn't understand what I said, here it is in writing. And spend some time looking at it. This is one of the most respected warriors of his generation, who's now Secretary of Defense, telling the Congress to end the madness. And tonight, we're going to end the madness. If we have to lose some sleep, we're going to end the madness. We're going to spend $160 billion over the next 2 years rebuilding a military that has been in decline since 2011. How bad is it? It's terrible. If you don't believe me, just listen to what our commanders say. The Navy is about 60% of the F-18s in the Navy aren't able to fly. We've lost more people in training accidents than we've lost on the battlefield. If you ask every military commander, they will tell you that sequestration has done a lot of damage when it comes to our military readiness. So this $160 billion infusion of cash is much needed. And when you talk about deficits, here's what I can tell you. We're spending GDP-wise at the lowest level on defense really since World War II when you look at GDP spending on defense. It's been above 4, close to 5% of GDP. We're in 3.5 range. So when I hear Senator Paul say we've doubled the defense budget compared to GDP spending on defense, we're in the low end. What's happened since 2011? This is the way the world has turned out since we passed sequestration through the Budget Control Act. The Syrian civil war came about, the collapse of Libya, the rise of ISIL, the invasion of the Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea by Russia. China is building islands over land claimed by others. Yemen is falling apart. North Korea is pressing toward the capability to hit the homeland with a nuclear-tipped missile. We've had cyber attacks come from North Korea. The bottom line, since 2011, all hell has broke loose, and we've been standing around here looking at each other instead of listening to our commanders. President Trump has listened. President Trump is behind this budget agreement. 2 years of funding to rebuild the military at a time they need every dollar they can get. So As to the deficits, yes, it bothers me, but here's what I can tell the public without any hesitation. You can eliminate the Department of Defense and you're not going to change the debt situation long-term for the country. 2/3 of the debt is driven by mandatory spending and interest on the debt itself. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are entitlement programs that are growing in a tremendous fashion because the baby boomers are retiring en masse. We have less workers and all these trust funds are failing. That's what drives the debt, not military spending. 1/3 of the federal budget is discretionary spending. Out of that 1/3 comes the military, and it's about 50% of the 1/3. All I can say is that I want to applaud Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer for reaching an agreement. The non-defense spending is about $160-something billion. Now, what does that mean? That helps the FBI. The FBI, without this infusion of cash, will have less agents in 2018 than we did in 2013. Now, they're on the front line of defending the nation as much as anybody else. Department of Homeland Security, the CIA, the National Security Administration, the CIA, all of these non-defense agencies have a defense role, and they will benefit from this budget agreement. Sequestration did not get us out of debt. Fixing sequestration is not going to add to the debt in any serious way. Every Republican voted for the tax cuts because we believe that the $1.5 trillion will be made up by economic growth and then some, and I think we're more right than wrong about that. When it comes to defense spending, Republicans and Democrats have finally listened to this statement by General Mattis, and all of us came together behind our president to increase defense spending in a fashion relevant to the need. To those who believe that the military is well funded, you're not listening to anybody in the military. You haven't spent any time out in the field. I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan 42 times in the last decade. I can tell you the pressure that's been placed upon our military. You have to put all the money in deploying people, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so training suffers, readiness suffers. It's a miserable experience to be in the military in the last 4 or 5 years. Families go lacking. People deploy more than they should because we're not big enough. This $160 billion is going to allow us to grow the Navy. We're moving toward a 350-ship Navy, not 278. We've got the smallest Navy since 1915. The smallest Army since 1940 is where we're headed under sequestration. This turns it around. So President Trump, thank you for keeping your promise to rebuild our military. To Senator Schumer and McConnell, thank you for working together and getting us on track to rebuild the military and help some accounts that need help outside the military. To the members of the body, there's a million reasons to vote no in any bill. Well, I respect how you vote. I just don't know how you go to the military and explain your vote if you vote no. How do you tell those in uniform who are getting by under incredible, difficult conditions because they don't have the money to train and be ready? They're in a hot war. What do you tell them? Well, I voted no because this and that. You know, the deficit and debt are a problem. Senator Paul, to his great credit, is willing to reform entitlements. I've worked with him and Senator Lee to reform Medicare and do something about Social Security to keep these programs from going broke. So I will compliment Senator Paul. He is a man of great political courage when it comes to taking on hard issues like entitlement reform. But when it comes to the military, I could not be more different. He's holding us up. He has every right to do so. I just want to let our soldiers know and all their families that we're going to wait him out, that you're not the reason we're in debt. The money we're giving you, you take gladly. There'll be a small pay raise in here, but Senator Paul's solution to raising pay for the military is to withdraw from Afghanistan. I've not heard one general tell me that we can leave Afghanistan safely. That day will come, but we're nowhere near that day. And all I can tell the public is the last time we took our eye off Afghanistan, we got 9/11. I don't know how much money we spent after 9/11. We lost 3,000 Americans almost, based on 19 people willing to kill themselves, and they took 3,000 of us with them. Just think what would happen if we left too soon. We're not going to do that again. Never again. So I trust our military leadership. I'm proud of my Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, for giving them the ability to fight the war. The gloves are now off. They just need the resources to take the fight to the enemy and turn it around, because what happens over there matters here. If you don't believe me, remember 9/11. So whatever it takes, as long as it takes, we're going to increase defense spending in the next 24 hours. Then we're going to start marching to fixing other problems. The Dreamers, they've waited a very long time to bring certainty to their lives. Next week, we take up their problems, their plight. But the one thing I can tell you, today, in the next 24 hours, we're going to end the nightmare for the military. And next week, we'll take up solutions to help the DREAM Act population and secure our borders. We can do two things at once. And if you want to get the country out of debt, count me in. If you want to tell younger people they got to work longer and can't retire at 65 because we live so much longer, count me in. If you want people in my income level to take less from Social Security because I can afford to give some up, count me in. If you want people in my income level to pay more into Medicare because we should, count me in. The one thing you cannot count on me is to use the military as a punching bag and blame it on them that we're in debt, because we're not, because of them. Here's what General Mattis said: we can always afford freedom. We can afford survival. And if you don't believe the people we're fighting would kill us all if they could, then you got a short memory. The only reason 3,000 died on 9/11 and not 3 million is they couldn't get the weapons to kill more of us. If North Korea keeps going the way it's going, God help us all. If the Iranians ever go nuclear, God help us all. We live in dangerous times. If radical Islam could get their hands on a chemical, biological weapon, they would use it. And the best way to keep them from hurting us here is to stay over there and partner with our Afghan partners, Iraqi partners, and others. More Muslims have died in this fight than anybody else. They've seen the face of the enemy, and I have certainly seen it. And the best way to keep it off our shores is to have a strong military, creating lines of defenses over there so we can be safe here. And I am very happy tonight. I had to miss my flight, not go get much sleep, but what we're doing pales in comparison to what the military has done for the last 5 or 6 years. A lot with less. They've taken on too much danger, too much risk, because the Congress has sat on the sideline and watched Rome burn. Well, those days are over. So whenever we vote, we're going to vote, and I'll make a prediction. We're going to get more than 60 votes to fund the military. When it gets to the House, to my fiscal conservative friends, I understand there are things in the non-defense spending aspect of this you don't like. I get that. But there are Democrats in this body, and there are Democrats in the House, and they have a say. That's just the way it is. So I will sleep well tonight. I may not sleep long, but I will sleep well knowing that the men and women in uniform who have suffered so much for so long are going to be better off in the morning. So a short night for me will be better days ahead for them. And all I can say to my colleagues, don't let these groups mislead you about what your job is. Your job as a member of the United States Congress, in my opinion, is to defend this nation above all else. Without national security, Social Security really doesn't matter. Without national security, everything that we enjoy could be lost. So the primary role of the federal government, in my view, is to give the men and women in uniform, who are all volunteers, what they need to keep us safe. And come tomorrow, they're going to have more. And if it means we stay up late tonight, so be it. To the congressional leadership, thank you. To the President, thank you for being a commander-in-chief we've desperately needed for the last 8+ years. To my colleagues, vote yes. You may get some criticism from people who run blogs, but the next time you see a soldier, you know that you voted right. I yield.